everyone. Got it. Great. Welcome, everyone. I know everyone is trickling in. Thank you so much for your patience and sorry for the wait. Welcome. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. My name is Emily from the Career Advising and Transition Services Office at the McGill School of Continuing Studies. It's a pleasure to be here today with my colleague, Diana Viola, if you want to say hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Today is already the last day of the 4 days of power skills. It's been a couple days filled with magic, I'd say. This year's theme is Lives Transformed, Our Post-Pandemic Era, and there's been such an amazing list of sessions that we've been inspired by in the last few sessions, over the last couple of days. I'd like to recognize that we at CATS acknowledge that our work in Montreal takes place on the unceded Indigenous lands, part of the Mohawk Nation, which I would like to show a quick video. Sorry about that, just 1 second. This land is known as a place of gathering for many First Nations, and here at Power Skills, we're committed to using this summit as a place of gathering, connection, reconnection, and empowerment of all voices and perspectives. It's my pleasure today to introduce you to our speaker, Marlo Turner-Ritchie. For those of you who don't know Marlo, I'm going to have to read her bio. She has an amazing list of accomplishments. She has an extensive experience involved in meaningful leadership initiatives and programs through volunteering and employment in the nonprofit, co-op, and public sectors in Montreal, and has provided works on a whole variety of opportunities, dynamic opportunities, and has worked with multidisciplinary teams through opportunities of growth and change. She founded Social Impact Consulting and has since then worked with over 80 nonprofit organizations, foundations, and cooperatives on strategic planning, fundraising, governance, and more. We're going to learn a lot about Marlo's journey, so I'll let her elaborate on that. And I'm just so pleased to welcome you here today, Marlo. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Emily and Diana, and welcome to everybody who's participating. I also want to acknowledge that I do the majority of my work on the lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka. And these days, I think it's really important to reach out and work in solidarity with Indigenous organizations, not only because of the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but also just to be good neighbors and to acknowledge the power and the knowledge that that our Indigenous neighbors possess. And in the pandemic, we know that Indigenous communities and communities of color are disproportionately affected. So I just encourage everyone to reach out in the ways that you can and support your Indigenous neighbors. So today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the social sector, otherwise known as the nonprofit sector. So we're going to talk about where you're coming from. I'm glad that this is kind of a small, intimate group because we can have more of an exchange. I'm going to talk to you about some of the impacts of the pandemic on the sector, some of the coping strategies that the sector has adopted, And then we're going to hear, I think I'll do 2 short interviews because we started a bit late, with leaders from the sector talking about their work during the pandemic and the types of skills that they've been building and using in this exceptional time. So let's just do a quick survey using the chat function at the very bottom of your screen. If you can write in if you are currently working in the nonprofit sector, in the public sector, in the private sector, or if you're in between gigs right now, you can just write in between. So if you can write down nonprofit, private, public. Okay, so we've got kind of a mixed group. We've got a few people who are working in the nonprofit sector. So for those people who are working in the nonprofit sector, can you write in how many years you've been working in the sector for? 10 years, Liliana, that's great. And I think there was another person who was, 3 years, Tanae. Great. And we've got some public sector people too. How many years experience in the public sector do people have? Okay, Emily was in nonprofit for 6 to 7. Diana, 4 years in the public sector. Annie, wow, 25 years in education, Anna, that's great. And 4 years in public sector. Fantastic. So this is a nice mixed group of people. So I'm just going to do a share screen here and pull up my presentation. So I won't go through my bio in detail, just to save some time. You can always have access to the presentation after. But I do want to highlight that in my career path, because we're talking about career journeys and transitions and skills building, I've taken time off. And I think many leaders hesitate to talk about that. And people often get very anxious when they have gaps in their CV. And I just want to reiterate that it's really healthy to take time off. It's important to take time away from this work. So I've taken a couple of rest periods in my life, and those allowed me to kind of reinvent myself and to do a deep dive and figure out what I wanted to focus on next. And if I hadn't taken that time off right after having my baby, I wouldn't have launched my consulting business. So sometimes when we take a step back, we're actually taking a step towards something brand new that can be very fulfilling for ourselves and our communities. So if you are one of those people right now that's taking a step back, I just want to validate that that's really important and good for you for taking that time. So just a little bit about our consulting business. So we do specialize in strategic planning, change management, governance, fundraising and communications, HR, process design and facilitation. So what that means is that basically anything that's nonprofit, foundation, or cooperative related, if you throw it at us, we'll catch it and run with it. Like we like a good challenge, and we're used to working across multiple issues. So we're a team of 5 women. So this is my team, and Lauralee in the top left-hand corner is my other primary consultant. She's done a lot of work with Black communities in Montreal, and also she's on the board in Kingston, Jamaica, of the YMCA in Kingston, Jamaica. And then, across our team, we have multiple skills. So why focus on the social sector? When I looked at the conference information, I noticed a gap there. I noticed that there wasn't a lot of focus on the nonprofit sector, and yet it makes up 8.7% of Canada's GDP. And there's an estimated 170,000 registered charities and nonprofits across the country, and it represents one of the fastest growing segments of the economy. Also, the social sector has stepped up really significantly in the pandemic, and there are huge opportunities for employment and volunteering in the sector right now. If you're interested in learning more about the sources of these statistics, you can check out Imagine Canada, and they're kind of like the watchdog for the charitable sector in Canada. And I apologize for background noise. I locked myself out of my apartment, so I'm actually in a cafe in my neighborhood. So let's talk about some of the impacts of the pandemic. So it's been significant. The clients that I've been working with it's not business as usual. People are seeing increased demands of up to at least a third. My local food bank in my neighborhood or community food center has tripled their production since the beginning of the pandemic, which it has been like, they had to move into an arena, a hockey arena, just to handle their sorting and distribution methods, for example. And at the same time, as demands are increasing, revenues are down. The only exception to that is government revenues have increased because there's been emergency relief measures that the nonprofit sector has benefited from, like CUES, and some of the workers have benefited from CURB. And also, you know, any organization that was dependent on event-based fundraising has seen a huge decline. Some organizations were successfully able to adapt those to online strategies, but many were not. So huge adaptations in the sector. 3/4 of nonprofits have adapted in some way or another. And as we know, arts organizations have been hit very hard. They're just now starting to sort of reawaken. Some of them have been creative and able to do pop-up events outdoors and online, but they've really taken a huge hit. And, you know, we're just seeing an increased focus on innovation and experimentation. So, for example, in my neighborhood, just in the west end of Montreal, we saw a grocery support line pop up that was a partnership between a seniors organization, the community council, and some businesses locally, where people were just mobilized to make sure that seniors could get their groceries delivered to them during that lockdown period. So we talked about the decrease in revenues. The other thing is the paid and volunteer labor supplies continue to be disrupted, which is another good reason for, if you're exploring involvement in this sector, if you want to deepen your connection to the sector, now is the time to do that. In September, we're going to see probably unprecedented levels of job postings. We've had decline in volunteerism. Attrition has been high, and you know, some organizations are actually struggling to find staff right now. So the future is a bit gloomy. A lot of nonprofits are feeling pessimistic about their future, especially related to their financial position. And 1 in 6 charities believe they will not be able to operate at least a year if conditions don't improve. So this is an opportunity for you to go to Imagine Canada's website after the workshop and sign the petitions that they have, which call on the federal government supporting the nonprofit sector in an equal way to, for example, the business sector through the pandemic, making sure that those income relief measures, those rental subsidy measures stay in place. So I was thinking about the major sort of themes around adaptation and coping. And these are the ones that I came up with that I've observed since the pandemic started directly with my clients. So we've seen this theme of adaptation, experimentation, and scaling. We've also seen an increased focus on capacity building. So some organizations are taking a step back from the daily work and focusing more on building their internal capacity. There's an increased preoccupation and commitment to self-care and collective care. So for example, more flex hours, you know, work from home options, increased pay for COVID risk related situations, increased mental health days, increased commitment to offering benefits, so that kind of thing, and also a deepened commitment to anti-oppression work and reaching communities disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And that is in large part due to the grassroots movement building work of Indigenous communities and communities of color, such as through Black Lives Matter. And grassroots solidarity work has popped up in every single neighborhood across the country. So we've seen large numbers of unincorporated groups. Sometimes they're called mutual aid networks and associations that are not incorporated. So they're very agile. And sometimes they'll have a fiduciary partner, which means they can kind of sidle up next to an established nonprofit or an established charity and they can access funds through that organization, which is a completely legitimate way for charities to manage money. They're allowed to donate a certain amount to qualified donees. So these are 5 themes that I've observed in the nonprofit sector during the pandemic. So we have 3 stories here, and I think I'll share the first one and then the third one, and then the second one. They're all available on my YouTube channel under my name, so you can always watch them after, because we won't have time for Cassandra's story. So we'll start with Jean, and Jean started a sewing collective in Park X, which is one of the communities that is disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And she's been working with asylum seekers and women, so women who are asylum seekers. And I'll just cue up the video here, and hopefully you'll be able to hear this. So you'll just have to let me know if you can't, and then we'll troubleshoot the audio. I think there's probably a way to do that.
No, we don't hear the audio.
Okay, so I think I have to change a setting on the.
Well, actually, yeah, I think you can try share. When you do share screen, maybe just stop sharing, and then when you reshare, you see at the bottom of the box, the pop-up, you click something like with sound or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Share. Let's see. Did that work?
No.
Okay, hold on. Let me try.
When you click share screen, as you've done, there's a little box at the bottom, and you just click on. It's just says something like with sound or something.
I don't see. It just says you're okay. Let me stop sharing again.
Okay.
And when I click share screen, oh, share sound. There we go. Got it. Awesome. Thank you. Some grassroots projects, of like non-incorporated projects. So can you tell me about your project?
With great pleasure. It's a pleasure to be interviewed by you, Marlo. And so the project that was launched during the pandemic is a small sewing network in Park Extension in Montreal. And this sewing network was born out of the necessity of masks at first, and then it morphed into a little network of seamstresses that was able to answer different needs of organizations in the community.
An And who is participating in the project?
So it's a group. It's hard to define. So I usually use an association of words. I say our group. I will say the seamstresses, the neighbors. So we're all neighbors. We're all sewing, but also the people who participated are mothers from the elementary school of Park Extension, and are also in the great majority, the people who decided to participate are asylum seekers coming from India or more specifically Punjab.
Great. And what kind of needs and desires do these women have that you've learned about?
And it's I mean, this question is well asked because the it's through the relationships that we created that we learned to know about each other. And when this project answered in terms of their needs, what I learned was that one, it was the desire to be active during the pandemic. All of them were mothers. At the beginning, they were confined at home, so there was really a need to do something, get out of their head, find a manual way to analyze anxiety. Also, give back, feel like they are bringing good to the world. feel like they are connected to others, even through the distance. And also for some, it ended up being also plainly a need to have access to a sewing machine, because through the project, they could have access to a home sewing machine. And for some also, it ended up being a small source of income during times where, because of their status, they would not have access to a lot of financial help. And also because of their status and sometimes also their gender, they hadn't accumulated enough hours of paid work to have access to other types of financial assistance.
Yeah. And how did you get your project started? Like, where did you find the funding? What kind of clients did you find?
The project was born before the funding. That's how it happened in a situation of emergency. So at first, the idea came, I was already making masks, and then there was a request from the mutual aid group in Park Extension to have more masks. And then at the same time, I thought, okay, so we need to find seamstresses that would be interested to sew. And then we went and got some support from the elementary school. Someone in the elementary school spoke to different parents, and that's how she got them involved. And so we had this kind of group, and when the group ended up starting to be formed, we got to apply to funding from Shift Concordia, which was really instrumental and really special, because it's really hard to access funding when you're not an incorporated group. But Shift Concordia made it possible for individuals and ad hoc associations to access funding.
Excellent. And then you had some clients, right?
Oh, yes, exactly. The question about clients. Yeah, so the clients at first were the mutual aid group. So we went mostly with groups, and then sometimes individuals would reach us, but it went mostly through mutual aid group, gardening association, women association, the perinatal center here in La Maison Bleue. And then later on, when we started to have orders for mittens in the winter or for caps, it was the table de concertation, or it was local organizations.
That's great. Okay, I'm just going to stop the video because I want to switch over to Cassandra. Just 1 sec, I'm just going to get it queued up here. So as you could hear in Jean's sharing, she really was operating from a grassroots neighborhood-based perspective. And she drew on her own skills and her own interests of being a seamstress and being able to sew and connecting with women and building relationships with the participants that way. And she also reached out to more established nonprofits and table de concertation, which is like roundtables for support and guidance in that process. So that was a great example of these pop-up grassroots initiatives that we've seen across the country, and some of them will remain after the pandemic. And we want them to, because they're actually filling gaps in programming that just doesn't exist and hasn't existed. So now we're going to switch gears and go to a very established charity called DESTA Black Youth Network, which is based in Little Burgundy, which is kind of in the center-south area of Montreal. And we're going to hear from Cassandra.
Thank you.
Hey, Cassandra.
Hello.
So
Nice
welcome to your interview. I'm really excited to talk to you and to share the story of DESTA during the pandemic, but also just in general. So yeah, tell us a bit about who DESTA is. What kind of organization are you and what do you do?
Sure. So DESTA is an organization, we've been around 15 years. This is our 15th year of operations, and we've always had more or less the same mandate, which is really to have programs that empower the Black community, the English-speaking Black community, and specifically Black youth. So young adults coming into their lives, basically building their careers, finishing their education. There are so many obstacles in this society, being Black, and then on top of that, being primarily English speaking. So there are so many obstacles to overcome. So the work that DESTA does is really to help level the playing field a little bit for this specific population, as well as really see them come full circle. So we've seen a lot of beautiful examples of past participants coming back and either mentoring or hiring current participants. So it's this nice full circle thing that happens where you can really say that's building community, and it's building a long-term positive cycle. And so that's pretty much, I can get into the details of some of our programming if you want.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, if you want to describe some of them.
Okay, so currently we have 3 areas of focus that revolve around education, employability, and entrepreneurship. Now, in addition to that, I wouldn't say in addition, but another areas of focus are our food program, which we launched about a year ago, and our reentry program, which has been around since early on in DESTA's inception. And those 2 programs are particular because they answer a very, very specific need. With the reentry program, we're working with people coming out of incarceration who, on top of being Black and English speaking, have an additional obstacle to overcome when trying to reintegrate back into society. So, you know, we can talk about education, employability, and entrepreneurship, which are the tools that we use for this population, but there's another level of work that needs to be done when you're dealing with people coming out of the criminal justice system. And then the food program actually came out of a need that we assessed, you know, as the pandemic was, I don't want to say gearing up, but as the pandemic was basically affecting everybody's lives, food security has always been an issue in the community, but I think with the pandemic, it became more apparent. It became more of an issue that DESTA was trying to figure out how we can get involved in the community in that way while still promoting entrepreneurship, employability, which are, you know, 2 of our key pillars. So we came up with an innovative food program that essentially promotes entrepreneurship within the community. So we are purchasing from Black-owned food businesses, not only purchasing from them, but helping them to build their businesses. So we have an incubator that helps chefs, caterers, local restaurants that are Black-owned to build their businesses while we serve the community with their delicious food. So that's a program that has been really well received by the community, well received by the entrepreneurs in the community. And so it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, no kidding. And add a way to pivot in the pandemic, right? To just add on like this whole new program. That's no small feat to do that and to have it be so successful. What kinds of opportunities, like whether they were financial or in terms of volunteers or mentors, emerged during the pandemic?
Well, that was a big one. I think, you know, with the pandemic, so the pandemic emerged in March of 2020. And then following that, we had the death of George Floyd, or the murder of George Floyd, which brought another, or brought up a lot of public sentiment around police brutality, around systemic racism. And so, you know, we were as a Black organization, a Black serving organization, we were really put in the spotlight, we got a lot of attention from people wanting to help, from people reaching out, asking what is it that we can do to, help to address these issues. And I think, it was actually very difficult for us as an organization because we were really rebuilding ourselves. We were in this process of rebuilding starting at the end of 2019. We come into 2020, we have COVID. We're kind of like, what is this? We don't know how long it's going to last. So there were so many question marks. We were building and growing. And at the same time, we were getting so much attention that was difficult to keep up with. So I think, when we talk about the issues that came up with the pandemic, I think it was even difficult for us to even pinpoint those issues as a community, because there was, a lot of information that was coming out, but there was not specific information related to our community. So there was a push, to get health data, to really understand what our specific community was going through at the time. And so I'm very grateful to other organizations that stepped in and really, answered that call, because we were able to benefit as an organization from that data. So I think a lot of things came out in terms of obviously physical health. So a lot of the lifestyle diseases that our population deals with at higher levels than other populations. A lack of access because of language issues, racism within the actual, hospitals, and the very resources that people will need when they're sick, they are experiencing racism in these institutions as well. Other things that came out were just a lack of being able to access information, especially with older communities who were not necessarily well linked to the internet. So that was a big one. And then just isolation, not having human contact, not having just people checking in. One of the beautiful things actually about our food program, which it allowed people to have that human, for some people that was like one of the very few contact points that they had with a physical human being, bringing them, a meal every week. So, that in itself was something we were able to address as well. But it was difficult because there were so many things were changing so rapidly. Lack of, I think, consolidated information, and then just lack of capacity to be able to even access that information and gather that information from the community. That was challenging.
And speaking of, we're just going to stop the interview with Cassandra there because we have one more interview to feature. So just 1 second. Okay. And so with Cassandra, we heard how the organization really pivoted in the pandemic. They adopted a whole new food security program, which kind of hit multiple sort of performance indicators. Like they boosted entrepreneurship, and they also broke isolation and hunger in the process, and they were building community. Thanks for joining us, Anna. So yeah, now we're going to the final interview, which is with Ushana, and she's the executive director of a family support organization in NDG in the West End of Montreal. Here.
Got it.
Hello, Ushana.
Hi.
Hi, welcome to your interview.
Thank you.
So I would love you to share the stories about Maison Transitionnelle 03 and the impacts of the pandemic. So let's start with just describing your organization. What does 03 do?
Sure. So 03 is a small nonprofit in NDG. And what we do is offer subsidized and support services to young vulnerable parents who are 16 to 30 years old, and they have at least one child 0 to 5 years old. So they can stay with us for up to 5 years. They pay a maximum of 25% of their income in rent, and the rest is subsidized by the government. And we offer services around parenting, going back to school, budgeting and financial literacy, mental health, healthy living, and just really try to help them get back on track so that when they leave us, they're more stable and they have a promising future.
Fantastic. So we were talking before this interview about how O3 is like a little village, right?
Yes.
And how, you know, everybody's living in close proximity and your workers are working really closely with the families. So the pandemic comes along. What were some of the impacts that you started to notice in your village?
Yeah, so I forgot to mention in describing the organization, the families live on site and we operate on the ground floor level and the families are right above us. And I would say the biggest hit of the pandemic was the isolation of the families. Probably 90% of our families are single moms alone with their kids. Maybe only about, at best, a quarter have a co-parent who's actively involved. And so our program steps in to offer respite. We offer workshops, we offer, you know, coffee clubs and outings and collective kitchen and ways for moms to gather and develop friendships and not feel so alone. And then the pandemic hits and everything stopped overnight without preparation. And so the moms went from seeing us 4 nights a week and dropping in throughout the day and having dinner with us and to 0. And at the same time, their daycares and schools were closed. And so what used to keep me up at night is I knew that these moms were with their children 24/7 without respite. We couldn't offer respite. Maybe dad couldn't offer respite. And even if there were parents or grandparents around, at that time, they were saying you can't go around the elderly because they were the most vulnerable. So for me, it was the isolation was the worst part.
Yeah. So what were some of the strategies that you used in the pandemic to try to get around some of this isolation and start to break it down?
So we pivoted online pretty quickly. We were only closed for the last 2 weeks of March, and then we've been back to work since April 2020, and we pivoted online. So we had sort of twice a week, like little coffee club mini gatherings on Zoom. At that time, our amazing staff, you know, was doing phone checks with the moms, especially the ones that we knew had the least support or outside help. We did, even with the kids, we tried to have some activities with our wonderful childcare worker. She did by age group to try to keep them stimulated to the extent that she could. Storytelling, you know, treasure hunting in the house, go find a spoon, go find a pencil, go find something the color blue, to keep the kids engaged. And we did that, you know, sort of from April until the summer opened up. And then when it was a little bit safe to go outside, then we started to have gatherings outdoors with the masks and took the kids to the park so that they could have physical activity and psychosocial stimulation and just fun time instead of being inside. And so that's kind of how we made it through the summer.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What kind of partnerships and support did you get during the pandemic? Like, what kind of boost did you get from the community?
So we have an annual fundraiser, and we raised more money actually in that fundraiser than we ever had. I thought people are suffering; they're not gonna be able to go in their pockets, but they did, which was helpful. There were grants available, and we had grants that really allowed us to do things that we normally can't. So we were able to buy technology, iPads, because some of our moms don't have computers, and so they can't study online if they don't have access. I had always been passionate about supporting dads because that helps support the family unit and the mom gets some extra help. And so we got funding to hire a father engagement coordinator, which has been
Cool.
a fantastic success. And so that is what allowed us to just keep going. And I cannot emphasize enough food security. We had partner organizations who stepped up and delivered food weekly to our families. ACDPN stepped in. The NDG Food Depot was giving food. We got food cards, grocery store cards, and the food security was a big issue. And we had people step up, so it helped.
Awesome. Now, how did you manage self-care and like collective care? Because your team was really on the front lines and shouldering a lot of the stress and the burden. So what were some of the coping strategies or the decisions or steps you took to make sure that your team was well during that period as well as they could be?
Yeah, it was a rough year. Full disclosure, I went on stress leave for 6 months. I tapped out in November 2020 and came back in April 2021. And I think it was a stressful time for everybody. But when you're going to sleep every night, worrying that COVID might come to one of the 29 families, and then it might spread through the community because we didn't know what would happen. It just got to be a little too much. And I had to take some time off for my own self-preservation. And I just have an incredible staff that now that I'm back, I say thank you every day, every little thing. And they're always like, but that's my job. And I'm like, but I don't take it for granted that even if it's your job, that it's not a difficult situation. I tried to be flexible. We had work from home hours. I understand if, people have to juggle childcare and, oh, the school is open. Oh, they just announced that the school is going to be closed for the rest of the week because there was a case in my child's class. I am very flexible about work-life balance and understanding that if a staff member has family duties and I can't support that, that impacts their work. Yeah. And so I think that's how we got through it, is really just caring about each other.
Yeah, awesome. And being flexible as a manager, you
have to, have, and I don't want it to come off like I'm just being flexible so that I can get more productivity. Right. I'm being flexible because I genuinely care about my staff, and that's something that means a lot to them. And so I want to do it. Yeah.
And good for you to take a step back when you needed to. So many leaders in the sector push themselves beyond what they should. And I think it models, really strong leadership to do that. And thank you for sharing that here.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. It took me a long time to finally make the decision. And I kept thinking, oh, everybody in the community sector is suffering. Who am I to take time off? And when I came back, so many people in the community told me they were proud of me for doing it. Yeah. And so, I'll take this time to say, you don't have to be a hero. People aren't going to judge you. People understand, and they'll be more supportive than you think. So if you need the time, take it.
Awesome. Yeah, really good advice. So in terms of what's next for O3, so a lot of the restrictions have been lifted. So we're not in the same pressure cooker as we were, say, back in, March, April, May. So what does the future look like? And that could mean like 3 months from now, 6 months from now. What are you looking forward to?
So honestly, this year, we are really going to focus on mental health, education, and co-parenting. Mental health, because that is what was most affected, I think, throughout the pandemic. And we are not going to ask our moms to keep on the hamster wheel of achieving their goals if their mental health isn't stable.
Right on.
So we're prioritizing that, number one. Number two, and you know what? And let me say also for the children, we've hired a psychoeducator for the first time ever.
Amazing.
Because we want someone to directly work with the children to make sure that their mental health is okay. So I don't want to forget that piece. Education, because there was learning loss for both parent and child. School was unstable, routines were unstable. Some people didn't adapt well to online learning. So we're going to do what we can to have extra tutoring and extra office hours where they can come down and use the computers to help support them. And we're trying to figure out what programming we can design to support the kids. And then finally, co-parenting. I mean, like I said, we were always passionate about it. We got funding in 2020. That funding ran out, but Community Partner has generously stepped up to continue that. And we're really going to try to engage the dads, because when the dads can help with pickup at daycare or drop off, or help make lunch, or take the child overnight, that gives mom a break. And so the child is bonding with dad, dad's bonding with child, mom gets some respite, family unit is stronger overall. So those are our 3 focuses this year.
All right, so that was the interview with Shoshana. And again, you can view all of the full interviews on the YouTube channel under my name. And probably before the end of the workshop, I can put the link in the chat as well. So we've got about 5 minutes left. I just want to open the floor for Q&A. I know that some of you are currently working in the sector and you might have questions about what the future holds for the sector, and what your career path might look like. For some of you who are working outside of the sector, you might be wondering how you can volunteer on boards of directors or other opportunities, and how you can support the sector. So yeah, just show me like an actual hand or a virtual hand if you have a question. Emily.
As everyone is thinking of their questions, I'll just ask, because at the School of Continuing Studies through the Career Advising and Transition Services, we offer strategic volunteering opportunities as an opportunity to connect our students and alumni to do meaningful work and do something that will help them in their careers, should they also wish to pursue careers in the nonprofit sector. So you've shared amazing initiatives right now, Marlo. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate the interviews, and yeah, you're having an applause from Guy. We would love to know if you have any specific organizations and resources that you want to share that you think people can tap into for for volunteering opportunities, whether that be in person or remote. So any of those resources could be really helpful.
I mean, again, if you go through CATS, you can also go through the Volunteer Bureau of Montreal. They have a wonderful matchmaking system. Mm-hmm. And I would also just look locally in your own neighborhoods for organizations that, for example, are working with communities that are disproportionately impacted. So, organizations working with communities of color, Indigenous folks, families, seniors, food security organizations, mental health organizations. They're always looking for volunteers. And, how many of you have actually volunteered on a board of directors? Can I just see a show of hands, or you can write it in the chat if you don't want to turn your video on. So Gary's done some work in the sector, and Emily as well. So that is a really awesome way to give back to the sector and to give back to your community. And the benefits of being on a board of directors is that you get to sort of oversee the health and well-being of an organization and help them, manage finances and make decisions, strategic decisions, and oversee human resources, support the executive director, that kind of thing. So it's a very, rich volunteering opportunity. It can be challenging too. Sometimes there's little dramas and conflicts that have to be negotiated, but that's true in any human system. But yeah, I would really recommend volunteering on a board of directors. Are there any other questions, Gary?
Yeah, Marlo, how can we diversify our boards? I think we're finding that the boards tend to be a bit older, not representative necessarily of some of our communities. So how do we get younger people interested in being on these boards, and certainly, younger people representing all of the multicultural communities in Montreal?
That's a fantastic question, Gary. I think a lot of organizations are striving for more diversity on their boards right now. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to actually make sure that your staff is diverse, right? So make sure that your paid positions have, people of color, Indigenous folk, young people in there, because they're going to act as a magnet for volunteers in the sector as well. So that would be my top recommendation.
Marlo, thank you so much. We have another question here from Vincenzo. I would like to know the requirements for being on the board of directors, if that's possible. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, the requirement is that you have to be 18 or over. That's the only kind of legal requirement. And you have to be able to make informed decisions. So you have to have the capacity to make informed decisions. But other than that, it really depends on the organization's rules or bylaws. about who can join the board. Often it's like a member of the organization, which means somebody who's received services or somebody who has donated to the organization or is you know, a friend of the organization in some way or another. And then the types of skills that are often sought out on boards are financial management, fundraising, human resources, operations management, evaluation. I know I'm missing some, accounting, conflict resolution, facilitation. So if you have skills in those areas, or if you've got some knowledge and you want to build on that knowledge, then boards of directors can be a great way to do that.
Thank you so much, Marlo. This was such a fantastic workshop. So we really needed, like you mentioned, there was a gap in our, you know, in the sessions offered at Power Skills. It's so important to learn about the social sector and seeing what has the social sector been up to, especially in Montreal during the pandemic. So thank you so much for sharing these initiatives. They've definitely provided a source of inspiration to me and for others as well. I see people are also interested in getting involved in the chat. Thank you for sharing the videos in the chat. I want to thank you, Marlo, and hopefully if you are interested, we would love to have you back and learn more from you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and good luck with all of your future endeavors, everyone.
Thanks, Marlo.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Everyone, join us. We have, as you know, we are at the end of Power Skills. Our next session is actually starting right now on inclusive networking with FDAF, and then we have a few others, and we are already wrapping up with Power Skills. Thank you so much for powering up with us here at Power Skills. Have fun, enjoy the last sessions, and it's been a pleasure seeing you all enjoy, connect, and explore so many different topics in terms that are helping you professionally and personally. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Take care, Marlo, and I hope you are able to get back home okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for being flexible. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Diana.